Hey folks, Nick here from another BookTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about some books that I would love to see adapted into a live action format, either movies or TV show. Now, to be clear, I don't actually care whether or not these ever get adapted. I think the want that we seem to collectively have to see our favorite books or comics or even animated movies adapted into a live action version of itself. I think it's a little weird because we have the story already in a format that we love. So why do we need it adapted at all? Like if it already exists, why adapt it? Why put it in live action, which is a severely limiting media, you know? Because with live action, you're locked in on what your characters look like because it's the actors. You're locked in on what scenery and settings look like because it's just the sets. You know, there's no like audience participation in it. Like with books and comics, the reader has to do some of the work. You know, the authors and the writers put down, you know, the building blocks and give you a bunch of the information. But since it is mostly just words, and with comics, even though there are images there, there's a lot in between the panels that doesn't happen that you have to fill in your head. So you're doing a lot of the work, and you kind of become the storyteller along with the actual writer. But with movies, that doesn't happen. It's just you just have to sit there and you take in what somebody else made. It's completely their thing. And it's really limiting because you're also limited to what you can do visually that looks good. I mean, CGI now has gotten so great, but we can't cross the uncanny valley. And there are just some things that we still can't do and make it look convincing. And in a lot of ways, the better it gets, the worse it looks. So why why put it in live action when it looks already so great in a comic, or just looks so vivid and great in your own head? So that's a little mini rant that I mean, I don't mean to undercut the entire premise of my video here, but what I'm trying to say is these books that I'm about to talk about, I wouldn't mind seeing a good live action attempt of them, but they are already great as they are, so if they never get adapted, I'm completely okay with that. I'll start off with some books that I was going to include on the list and then ended up changing my mind on. The first is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. It's a book I read a long time ago, and I've been seeing a lot of Blake Crouch content recently. He's kind of had a resurgence, and I've only read Dark Matter by him, and it was excellent. I really enjoyed Dark Matter. It's a great science fiction thriller, and it's about, if I remember correctly, it's about multiverses, which is really big right now. The reason I'm not including it on this list is because I looked it up, and apparently there is an adaptation in the works that's coming pretty soon. So, you know, I don't think it fits in on this oh, I would love to see it, because I am going to see it. It's going to happen pretty soon enough. On that note, the other thing I didn't include on this list was pretty much anything Brandon Sanderson, because, I mean, we know it's inevitable that we're getting that. Specifically, Mistborn, I think, would work really well as an adaptation. But more than anything, I think Mistborn would make a great video game. It would make a perfect video game. The allomancy powers as a video game mechanic, a movement mechanic, a fighting mechanic, would be awesome. I could see the interface in my head already. It basically builds itself. Someone just needs to actually go in and do it. So I think it's only a matter of time until we get a Mistborn video game, which I think could be really fun. And also Brandon Sanderson movies and TV shows just everywhere. It's inevitable. So with that, we'll start off with the first book that I've got here is Robert McCammon's Boy's Life. I think this, I mean, I've read 3 McCammon books, this, Swan Song, and mine. And honestly, I think all 3 would make a great adaptation. But Boy's Life in particular speaks to me as a great candidate for maybe a limited series, 8 to 10 episodes in a prestige format, because just the nature of this book, where each chapter is kind of its own vignette about the main character, as a child. I think it's perfect because each episode could be one of those vignettes. And there is an overall arcing story here of a murder that's going unsolved, that clues are picked up on throughout the book, and you can easily interweave that into a series that runs for 8 to 10 episodes and then wrap it up at the end there. It has the potential to be a good horror story, good fantasy, really touching, like beautiful emotional beats. This book really has it all. And I think if they did it well, if they execute it well, it would make a really good adaptation. Second book I had in mind is The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. This is the first Gentleman Bastards book. And everybody loves a good heist story, and watching heists get planned and executed and go wrong, and having to solve problems on the fly. It's just a fun time. It's a fun time at the movies. I think this could work as either a movie series or a TV show. And what would separate this from just like an Ocean's 11 is the unique setting of it being in a fantasy world that is kind of like Venice, with a lot of canals, just old-fashioned clothes and stuff like that. So it's not like a modern heist. It's a heist in a period setting, which is really cool. Like, that's a really cool idea. I don't know if we've gotten that before in a live action format, but I know that it works really, really well here. And if you cast it well and you get the right Locke and Jean, then you've got a series on your hand. You've got an actual franchise that you can build off of. I think the dialogue would transfer really, really well to a script. You could probably copy just a lot of the things here word for word, and it would work. If this would absolutely appeal to the heists, like a crime crowd, kind of lighthearted, but with that serious punch of violence that you might expect from a prestige style TV show or just an R-rated movie. Next up, I did cheat a little bit, and I wanted to do 5 books for this list, but I couldn't decide between which of these 2 to mention for this author. So it's Stephen King, because he's got a million books out there, and one of these books has been adapted before, and that's Needful Things. And this is one of my favorite Stephen King books. If you checked out my my top Stephen King books ranking, this I think was number 10 on it. This is a really awesome book, and the movie in the 90s was just okay. It was kind of lame. Ed Harris was in it. Max von Sydow played Leland Gaunt, which is really good casting, but it was just an okay movie. So I would really love to see this done again, and it makes me so sad because my partner, we watched that movie together, and she said something at the end of it that completely ruined my life, because I know it's never going to happen, and I wish that it would. And that is that they remake this movie, with Mads Mikkelsen playing Leland Gaunt and Hugh Dancy playing Sheriff Pangborn. And if you don't know why that's significant, then I encourage you to watch the TV show Hannibal that ran for 3 seasons like 10 years ago, in which Mikkelsen played Hannibal Lecter and Hugh Dancy played Will Graham. Their chemistry on that show and the way that they worked with each other, they're unparalleled. It's unbelievable chemistry, and just what they do together on screen works so incredibly well. And they would be perfect in these roles. I just don't think it's ever going to happen, and that's really sad because it's really perfect casting. But the other Stephen King book, which has never been adapted before, and it's unbelievable, is The Long Walk. This is begging for a live action adaptation. This could easily work as a TV show or a movie. The premise, you run the risk of it seeming like tired at this point, even though this was written well before things like Squid Game. That premise of a dystopian future where people have to compete, and it's like a winner-take-all situation where there's only one survivor at the end, and they do it for this great monetary prize or whatever. This was probably amongst the first to ever do that. It was written in the 70s, well before a lot of that stuff was written elsewhere, and it works so well. Now, I don't know how it would work in live action because you would need to get a really clever director because it is just walking. It is definitely just walking, and a lot of what makes this book so great is Stephen King's ability to write really well. So you would need a director who can take that excitement from the words that aren't going to be in the movie and find a way to heighten that in a visual format. So it would be a challenge, but I think this would be absolutely perfect for a live action treatment. Next up is another horror book, and I do think it's just a matter of time until this author gets adapted. My choice of his is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. I don't know that we have a ton of really good indigenous horror right now in movies and TV. I think there's some untapped potential there, and I think this would be a really good thing to kind of like spark that off in a way. Of course, if I'm wrong, if you know some like really good indigenous horror movies, let me know them in the comments. I'd love to see them. But this really awesome book, like one of the books that like has surprised me the most and actually got like a visceral reaction out of me. I actually outwardly reacted to things that I read in this book because they shocked me, and I would love to see that in a live action format. I don't know that you can do it, scene for scene, because the way this is written, it's like there's entire sections spent with different people, and they don't come back. So it's like one part with one person, second part with another person, and so on. So it might be a little bit wonky in a live action, in a movie or a TV show. So maybe rework it in some way so that all the characters are interacting throughout, something like that. I don't know. But there's definitely potential there. And you've got a creepy deer entity where you can get a lot of great visual images out of it. It could be a really iconic type of movie. So I wouldn't mind seeing this on the big screen. And finally, I'm going to wrap up with a graphic novel that I would be interested in seeing adapted under one single circumstance. And it's Black Hole by Charles Burns. And I never, ever want this book to get adapted unless it's directed by David Lynch, which isn't going to happen. There's no way he would ever do it. First of all, he's kind of old now. I don't know that he's got any other projects that he's going to be working on or any movies that we're going to see from him. But this would be a perfect career ender for Lynch, I think, because it's almost like he can go back to Eraserhead, his first movie. He could do it in black and white. It's this weird body horror type story. It's set in the 70s. I just think he would have a lot of fun with it. I would love to see his take on it, but it would never happen. The story is about takes place in the 70s. It's in the suburbs in Seattle and Washington. And these kids, there's a STD going around that when you catch it, it mutates you in some way. Some of them are small mutations that are easy to hide, but a lot of times it's really like noticeable and ugly ones. But these kids are bored. This comic was written in the 90s during the grunge era. So even though it's set in the 70s, it's very grungy, like Nirvana type stuff. So these kids are bored. They're smoking, they're doing drugs, and they're having sex. Even with the STD going around. I just think it would be really, really cool to see some psychedelic imagery from David Lynch with this as the jumping off point. So if it's not him, I don't ever want it adapted. So that's going to be my caveat for this. Also, if you haven't read this, do it. Read it, please. So that wraps up the books that I would like to see adapted, maybe, but also if they never get adapted, that's completely fine because they're great in the format that they exist now. Live action is not the pinnacle of media. Fight me on it if you want. Let me know if there's any books that you would like to see adapted in the comments below. Thank you for spending some time with me today, but now it's time to get back to reading.